Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Football Scout FPL tips video for game week 20. My name's Rich and I'm back. I missed the Scoutcast, but it's well worth checking out with Andy and with Seb. There was a lot of really good stuff on there. I've got a few tips that I wanted to go through ahead of game week 20. Now, we know this is a double game week once again, so they're coming thick and fast. So this week, the tips are going to be which teams can double. So we've got the confirmed doubles and then the potential doubles as well. We're going to look at defenders to target for game week 20 and of course beyond, but mainly with a focus on game week 20. We're going to look at the best Manchester City assets. So we're going to try and break those down because again, they're one of the teams that have a double in game week 20. So are going to be very, very popular. We're going to look at if Salah to KDB is worth it. I've seen a lot of people discussing that, the pros and cons. And then it's chip season as well when double game weeks are here. So we're going to look at the triple captaincy and whether it's worth putting on a certain Erling Haaland or potentially someone else, but I mean, probably Haaland. So we'll get straight into it. So we're going to look at, first of all, which teams can double. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on the audio version, you can always pop onto YouTube. Just go to Fantasy Football Scout because there will be a few things I put on the screen, that are relevant to what I'm talking about, but I'll talk through them, as much as possible. So first of all, we've got a screenshot on the screen from Lego Mane, a brilliant Twitter account who does a lot of stuff for Scout. Now, this basically shows us who's confirmed to double. So we don't actually have that many confirmed, but we have, so in game week 20, we've got Manchester City, have got Man United and Tottenham in a double game week. Tottenham themselves have got Arsenal at home, Man City away. Man United have got Man City at home. Then they go away to Crystal Palace. After Palace's performance the other day against Spurs, that looks a lot better than it was previously. And then Palace themselves are the fourth team to double this week. They've got Chelsea away, then Manchester United at home. Now, we have to skip a couple of game weeks. We have to go along to game week 23, which is the 11th of February for the next confirmed double. And that is Manchester City have got Aston Villa at home and then Arsenal away. So one very, very good fixture and then probably the hardest one possible. And then Arsenal themselves have got two home fixtures. They play Brentford, but then they've got Manchester City. Now, what I'm going to do, so this was shown on the Scoutcast last night, but Mikhail Tokvam, he's basically assessed the percentages of postponed fixtures and therefore potential double game weeks using statements that Ben Crellin has made. Now, Ben Crellin is obviously tweeting out lots of opinions and a lot of other, experts on fixtures are doing the same. So these percentages are changing all the time. And obviously they're going to be, some of them are going to be right and some of them are going to be wrong. So we've got all the confirmed doubles in game week 20. Now that's locked in. And that game week 23 double that I mentioned, that's locked in as it is as well. Game week 21 and 22 are where things get a little bit interesting. So game week 21, Arsenal have a chance at a double. So do Palace again. Chelsea do, Everton, Liverpool, Bournemouth and Brighton. So that's game week 21. So this is worth bearing in mind. Now, if Liverpool got this double, Liverpool would play Chelsea. And in that week, they're already playing Chelsea. So Liverpool and Chelsea would have a double, but it would be, against each other. So they'd have the home fixture and the away fixture. And I mean, that's not confirmed. However, a lot of people are looking at, obviously, Liverpool players are very expensive. Chelsea players, people bought in for a double, and maybe you were looking at moving them on quickly. But if that double game week's confirmed, and we're hoping, the deadline's on Friday, we're hoping that we get news about the double game weeks before Friday, that could change a lot of our plans. So while this is a tips video in the current landscape, but that landscape could change very quickly ahead of Friday. So I'll use this purely as informational purposes, have a little tinker, but I wouldn't do any transfers, until we get close to the deadline, just so we have the most information. Because another thing, so game week 22, Man United and Leeds, potentially, depends what happens in the FA Cup by all accounts. Avoiding replays would be a very good thing. They could double. So we could, in theory, have Chelsea and Liverpool doubling in 21, but then also Man United would have the double in 20 and then the double in 22 as well. So it's just worth bearing all this in mind. We won't go any further into the future. There is like a blank game week in game week 28. And also in 26, there's a potential again for a double for Liverpool and Wolves. It's just worth bearing this in mind. If you can, try and keep, 2 free transfers, although we're going into a double game week. So I know that's very, very difficult. So basically the roundup for this, I wouldn't call it a tip, but the first thing would be wait until Friday. Man City, with those fixtures, I think they're the absolute priority, and we're going to discuss those in our further tips. Man United are they're an odd one. They could become a priority. Lots of people have their assets anyway. They'd only really, in my opinion, become an actual priority if they doubled in 21 or 22. So again, wait until Friday. Manchester City are definitely the ones we're going to concentrate on. But Man United, if they double twice in a short span, I think getting to 2, probably 3, is going to be almost essential. So the next tip is the defences to target. So what I've got on screen is all the teams that double. So let's have a reminder of that. That's Palace, Man City, Man United and Tottenham. And I've used the Fantasy Football Scout members area to basically sort those fixtures in order of difficulty. So Crystal Palace have the best double from a defensive point of view, followed by Man City, followed by Man United, and then Spurs have basically the worst defensive fixtures of the double game week teams. And I mean, when you look at Tottenham's fixtures, they've obviously playing Arsenal, even though that's at home in the North London derby, and then they're away at Manchester City, the best attacking team in the league. So what I've then also done is basically created a table in the Fantasy Football Scout members area to sort the teams by expected goals conceded. And then I've highlighted the key teams, so the doublers again. So Man City in the whole league have the best defence. So probably not that surprising, but 12.38 XGC. So while they're second behind Palace on the fixture difficulty rating, and the fixtures do look tough on paper, Tottenham at home, Man United away, they're probably the best teams to target in defence. I mean, they definitely are the best teams to target in defence. I guess the problem is, and it will overlap with another tip, is there's lots of attacking players we could look at as well. Also, we need to look at, which players will actually play twice, within a double game week. Arsenal and Newcastle, no surprise, the second and third best defences by this metric. And then Man United are in 4th place. So Manchester City have got a 12.3 XGC. Arsenal and Newcastle, 15 and 16. The lower, the better. Then Man United are just behind them on 19.56. Quite a gap to Man City, though, worth bearing that in mind. And then Spurs are actually 5th under Conte at 20.64. Palace, actually, despite their recent, poor form, are still up there. They're still in, 8th place, just behind Brighton and West Ham, just ahead of Chelsea, 23 expected goals conceded. So I think the thing is here, they are 4 actually quite good defences. They've just got very, very difficult fixtures. I just wanted to look at that, first of all. And then what I've also done is gone on the Fantasy Football Scout Rate My Team. I love using this tool. It's a model. It tries to predict player points. Obviously, it's not going to be round numbers because this could be a simulation of 1,000 outcomes and the average is worked out. And of course, things like minutes could impact on this greatly. But if we look at this, we've got John Stones as the best defender for this game week. So for game week 20, 5.86. Just ahead of Trippier. So Trippier, single game week. I don't think anyone's going to be benching him at home to Fulham. He's on 5.53. So that says a lot when you've got Trippier just behind Stones. What is surprising, or maybe not surprising, is he's just ahead of Cancelo at 5.21. Definite minutes risk there for Cancelo. Then we got Shaw at 5.07, very popular asset, followed by Dalot at 4.77. Now, I've just seen, I'm recording this half-time in the Man United League Cup game, and Dalot's actually gone off injured. So that's definitely one to monitor in the press conferences and even, after the game, if there's any interviews with Ten Hag. Then after that, we got Perisic, 4.64, putting up the best numbers for defenders. So again, despite the tough fixtures, it's no real surprise. Now, one player I wanted to highlight. So all these players are, below 6, but above 4. We've got Rico Lewis at 4.03. I think, 3.9 million or whatever he is now, absolute bargain. And when you compare that price to Cancelo, I'm quite a big fan. I think there's a lot of people out there that think he's a trap, but I really do like Rico Lewis. So there's just some stats for you. Now, my tip here would be basically Stones, Lewis, Shaw and Perisic are all contenders. So if you're looking to buy a defender this week, they'd be the ones top on my list. A lot of people think because, Stones is right-footed, he's a lot more nailed. He's been playing well as well, that he's possibly or probably is the most nailed Manchester City defender. Obviously, you could go for Ederson, and then you've got that 100% or 99.9% security of getting any potential clean sheets. So Stones and Lewis, I think that depends on price points, but I actually really, really like both. I even think I lean more towards Lewis, but in my situation, my transfer value is awful. And, potentially there's so many good defenders at the moment. You're going to be playing players like Trippier. You're going to be playing players like Gabriel. Would there actually be room for a Man City defender long term? As mad as that sounds, I'd almost like having Lewis because you could just end up, benching him basically. Shaw's very, very popular. I was going to make an argument for Dalot, but with that injury, that argument's gone. And then Perisic, he puts up incredible numbers. He can play in the front three. Obviously, we know Kulusevski's back. Fixture's not great, but I think it's definitely worth having a look at Perisic. But again, quite expensive. I would say, so with Cancelo, I think this is a part of this tip as well. I would actually keep Cancelo if I owned him. I don't think it's worth it to remove, such a good player. Even though his numbers have dropped, he could come back, at any time. So for a double, if I was going into a single, I think I'd definitely sell Cancelo. And maybe if you've got a route where you can sell Cancelo and then, upgrade somewhere easily, maybe then I'd consider doing it. But this is one that could bite. And if I had Cancelo, same with Foden, I think I'd just hold and hope to get lucky. And I mean, even if they only start one game, they're such brilliant assets. So that's my tip there. So Man City again is our third tip. So basically the best Manchester City assets. What I've done here, again, I've gone into the Fantasy Football Scout members area and then exported it into a fancy table. I've basically then just highlighted quite a lot of players because there are quite a few options. Now, what I've done on this table is I've sorted by minutes per XGI. So basically for this, the lower the better. So the reason for that is it's the number of minutes they take to get an XGI. So that's XG, XA combined. If you are under 90, that means you're expected to get an attacking return, per game, basically, if you were to play 90 minutes. And obviously minutes are a big factor with this. Now, no surprise, there's one player under 90. He's the only one under 120, to be honest. That's Erling Haaland, 78.5 XGI. So he's expected to get more than attacking return per game. And obviously in a double game week, you'd hope for at least 2 attacking returns. Obviously, it doesn't always work out like that in the short term. But Haaland, no surprise, brilliant. I mean, this table, 14.47 XG. The closest to him is Foden with 3.74 for XG after that. So, yeah, magnificent. Then in second, quite a little way behind, we've got De Bruyne, XGI 124.3. Now, this is where, I saw Andy talking about this on the Scoutcast, actually. Completely agree. His XG is low. It's only 3.30. It's less than Foden. Over the season, it's all XA, and XA is obviously worth a lot less. He's got an XA of about 8. So I find it hard with De Bruyne. I do feel like he's overpriced, but then he's nailed and they've got a double game week. So I completely understand why people want to go there. And when you factor in, he's very good for bonus points. He gets an assist. He's probably going to get bonus as well. So De Bruyne, he's all right. I think he's slightly overpriced, but again, we'll get to him with another tip. Now, the 3 I wanted to talk about are Mahrez, Foden and Grealish. Now, we've got Mahrez 152, Foden 174, and then Grealish at 180. So I like Mahrez here. I really do. There's a lot of people that hate him. They say he's a troll, etc. I've seen as mentioning that, and I think there's good reason behind it. But I mean, he's been in brilliant form in recent weeks. I think, him and Grealish, it's their place to lose in the Man City team. Obviously, that's a very bold statement. And I'd look at stuff like, Fantasy Football Scout Luke, Disable. I'd see what his predicted lineups are. But for me, I think my favourite here is Mahrez. And I think they're worth a punt. If the rest of your team's in order, I think you can treat yourself. I've got Mount, for example. I'm looking at doing Mount to Mahrez. If I had Foden, I would just keep, for the same reasons I mentioned with Cancelo. And Grealish, I mean, his XG's not as high as Mahrez, not far behind. I just prefer Mahrez. But then when you look at the price difference, Mahrez 7.5, Grealish 6.8. I'd have no problem with someone going Grealish. Obviously, we've mentioned the defenders. It's worth seeing, Cancelo, Lewis and Stones. Lewis, very small sample. He did score on his Champions League debut, so I wouldn't let the 0.0 XG, completely put you off. And Cancelo's numbers aren't great either. So yeah, that's the Manchester City assets. So the tip for this would be Haaland goes without saying. KDB's expensive, but we'll get to him. I think Mahrez is worth the risk. Ederson, I think he's the safest asset. I think that, well, that's not very bold saying that. But Stones and Lewis, I'd strongly consider as well. Some of these really do depend on your team structure. So obviously I'm trying to make the tips as broad as possible. The fourth tip, we're going to keep this one quite brief, but I've got two players on the screen. One's got an XG of 0.5 and the other's got an XG of 0.2. The player with a 0.5 XG has, this is per 90 by the way, has an XA of 0.2, and then the other player has 0.5 XA. So they basically got inverted numbers, and it won't be a shock that Salah's the player on the left for those watching and KDB is the player on the right. So obviously Salah has a lot more goal threat than KDB has, but KDB has almost the same amount of XA, so assist threat, than Salah. So they're almost like inverted players. One thing worth bearing in mind is Salah's on penalties. Obviously he's not had any penalties, but that gives another tick in the Salah box for me as well. So, I mean, this is very, very self-explanatory. Salah is, one of the greatest FPL players, assets of all time. KDB, obviously he's brilliant and probably could say the same for him, but he's much more of a creator than a goal scorer. And in this game, you get more points for scoring goals. So my tip here is if you sell KDB to Salah, I would wait again till Friday. If Liverpool double in 21, for example, I think he's clearly going to be the best captain for 21. So you'll need to look at a way to get Salah back. Therefore, I don't really think it's worth the sale. If Salah has a double in 21, I think then I would look at, trying to get different Man City assets in. There's lots of cheap ones we talked about. I know some people won't want to go for Mahrez. It's risky. In a double game week, I'm happy to risk that myself. And then if Liverpool don't double, it's still a very, very marginal call. I can understand some teams wanting to do it. And again, it's team dependent. But I would really, really think about your future weeks if you're going to do it. I won't say don't do it, but properly think about what you're going to do. If there's other transfers you could do ahead of that, or if there's a way to get a different, Man City player in. The final tip is probably the most exciting one. It's basically, should we triple captain this week? Now, I've seen people saying they're going to captain Rashford. I've seen people say they're going to captain De Bruyne. But I really do think, and I almost hate myself for saying it, that Haaland's, I think it's a no-brainer to go for Haaland. The only option we've got is, do we triple captain now or do we wait till later? Now, like we mentioned, in game week 23, Man City double again. But then what I've got on the screen is the Rate My Team tool from Scout. So that says basically, it doesn't really give us a clear answer. So this is the projected points. So in game week 20, Haaland is projected to get 12.128 points. In the double in 23, Haaland is projected to get 12.38 points. So it really doesn't give an answer. And that's why it's such a marginal call. Now, I had absolutely no intention of using the triple captain this week. I was thinking, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to wait for a better double. But then when I started thinking how marginal this is, I looked at the time between games in 23, in that 23 double for Man City. So well worth checking that out. And then I started thinking, the end of the season, I've still got my bench boost and I want to, and free hit. So, and most people do. So what you'll want to do at the end of the season is you'll want to optimally play your free hit, your wild card and your bench boost. If you've got triple captain as well, you're then going to be a bit hamstrung, how you do it. So for me, I'm actually leaning now towards using it in 20 because I feel like it simplifies the end of the season somewhat. And we don't 100% know what later doubles are going to be. We don't know if Haaland's going to stay fit. Do we actually want to use a triple captain on someone like Salah? So that's why I'm thinking of using it this week. So to summarise, I think it's a very, very marginal call and I've got no problem with people waiting. I just feel like for me, and it is quite nice, knowing you have chips and you can use them, you can hold them against, your mini league rivals, etc. But I just think this is a perfect time to use it for me. I think it will make the end of the season a bit easier, a bit less complex. Something I've liked to do in previous seasons, which is unrelated but related at the same time, is use my bench boost earlier, just so the end of the season becomes good. Because sometimes you can have a week where you want to use the bench boost and you want to use the triple captain. It happened to a lot of people last season. So, this is a good, it's good for Haaland. It's a double game week. We think he's going to play both games. He's fit. I'm just going to go for it. I think. I keep having to add caveats to this. But yeah, I like it. So yeah, my tip there is I'm going to use it. I think it's a very, very marginal call. And yeah, no, thanks a lot for joining me today ahead of the double game week. Like I said, don't forget the deadline's on Friday. Don't miss the deadline. Please remember to like and subscribe, and all the stuff I've put together today you can find in the Fantasy Football Scout members area.